Alright, class. Today we're going to be moving on to a new chapter in our book, which will be covering ancient Mesopotamia. Just a quick preface. Throughout this lesson, we're going to be reading the book on your own. So I just want you to be aware that we're going to be pausing a lot throughout. So the materials you're going to need for this class are your book and either digital or hard copies of the handout you've been provided with. And I would like you to open up your books right now to page 33 and um, just get ready. So first, we're simply going to go through all the bolded words in this chapter. I just want to make a note. We're going to be using your guided notes quite a bit throughout this, so just remember this is what you're looking for. For this part of it, I want you to go through each of the bolded words. They're all throughout the guided notes. So I want you to pause right here, and I want you to go through the book, read all the bolded words, and when you're done, come back to me. Don't fill out your guided notes yet because we're going to do that together. So pause now. Alright, so now we're just going to go through each of the notes, or each of the keywords, and we're going to write them down in our guided notes. As I said before, they're all throughout the guided notes, so you're going to have to kind of look for them, but each one will be listed on the screen, so don't worry. Alright, so we're just going to start off with Mesopotamia. It's a very simple one. It's what this entire chapter is about, and it's simply the geographic location between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and that's really all it is. Everything else you need to know about Mesopotamia, you're going to learn as you read. Next, we have the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which are the two largest rivers in southwest Asia that flow from the mountains in Turkey to the Persian Gulf. The Zagros Mountains, one of the locations settled in by the ancient Mesopotamians, which had land that was good for growing crops. And irrigation, which is a means of supplying the land with water by redirecting it to where it is needed. So write those down. I'm going to just keep chugging along. If you need time between, you just feel free to pause, go back and listen to the definitions as I read them, but we're going to keep going. So next we have we have levee, which is a wall of earth built to prevent water from flooding its banks. This goes hand in hand with irrigation. You're going to see in this chapter that water is a really big part of the chapter, and that's because one of the main things any civilization needs to prosper is a very stable source of water, and this is where you'll see them struggling to find that reliable source of water. So there's also silt, and this definition I want you guys to expand upon it a little bit. So right now it says just fine particles of rock, but I would like you to add on fine particles of rock that would typically clog irrigation systems. And that's an important thing to know. I kind of forgot to put that part in, but just remember, fine particles of rock that would often clog irrigation systems. Alright, so up next we have city-state, which is kind of really what this entire chapter is going to lead up to, so it's going to be good to know this. So it's an early city that functioned like a small country with its own laws and government. And, we're going to see the progression of how these Mesopotamians were living as we go through this book. So this is kind of like the end game right here. So pay attention to that. And then we have Sumer, which is the southernmost region of Mesopotamia, often referred to as the cradle of civilization. And this is kind of like the big shebang. Like, you need to really remember this one, just because other chapters after this are going to be focusing a lot on Sumer because it is really the first big, like, centralized civilization, and that's a really big thing. So a lot of other chapters are going to refer back to Sumer, so you should really pay attention to this and know it. All right, so I want you guys to the um, read the introduction and come back to me when you're done. So pause right now. All right. So as you read in the introduction, there were four really main problems that the Mesopotamians faced as they were just figuring out where they wanted to settle. So Mesopotamians face these four problems right here. You can see them all right here. So first off, there were food shortages in the hills, and that refers to the Zagros Mountains. Those are the hills. So that was a big problem. You will read about that in a couple seconds. But we also had an uncontrolled water supply. Remember, water is a really big part of this chapter, really big part of civilization in general. So an uncontrolled water supply on the plains, and following that, building and maintaining a complex irrigation system. So a lot about water. And then attacks from neighboring communities. So these were the four main problems that Mesopotamians faced. And as we read, we're going to figure out how they overcame these. All right, so just before we go on to the next section, I really want to give you guys a visual of where everything in everything is on the map. I know you guys have maps in your books, but I'm just going to do this here for you. So right here, we have the Tigris River, and that leads into the Persian Gulf. Up here, the mountains of Turkey, and over here is the Euphrates River, and again, it also leads and starts at the same place. And everything in between that, all this green area, is Mesopotamia. And right here at the southernmost part of Mesopotamia, as we talked about, is Sumer. And over here is the Zagros Mountains. So I just wanted to give you guys that visual. We're going to talk a lot about it, so just like keep that in your mind, visualize it as we go. And right now, I want you guys to pause your video and read the next section of your book. So, all right, now that we've read that, I want to just go over this really quickly. Ignore the weird shading issues. I don't know what happened there. So, first, we have the perks of the Zagros Mountains. So these were the main part of this section. And I'm sure you already read these, but the three perks were plentiful and mild weather, or plentiful rain and mild weather, sorry, stones for tools, and timber for building. So these three things, they really made it an ideal place to live, and there really weren't that many downsides of the Zagros Mountains, except for this one problem that you read about in the section, which was the not enough room. It was that there wasn't enough room for the growing population. It was so good, and everybody was prospering there so well that there just wasn't enough room. And remember, as we go through this presentation, I want you guys to be filling out your guided notes, so you can have those as a reference. So please do that. And we're going to move on to the next section, so please pause again, and we'll continue once you're ready. All right, so now we have the uncontrolled water supply on the plains. And this one was a big one as well because, again, like I said, water is a big part of any civilization. So if they can't control their water supply, they're going to have a lot of problems just thriving as a civilization. So there are going to be keywords at the top of this. I'm sure you're going to see them as you're reading. Just remember these. It's what we're going to be talking about a lot. And it's just a reminder that you should have these filled in on that part of the guided notes. So right here is a description of the plains. It had the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The land was dry and cracked and didn't have many materials for tools or shelter. However, it would flood in the spring, bringing water. But you see, there's this problem. Since it did flood in the spring, that was a problem because too much water is a bad thing. But also the fact that the rest of the time it was dry and cracked, that was also a problem. So these were very dramatic seasonal changes, and that made it really hard to live in these areas because for one part it's dry and cracked and you don't have enough water, and then you have too much water. So it's kind of two sides of the extremes. And it also really complicated farming. But what farmers did to solve this was they created irrigation systems and levees to control the water. So irrigation, they moved the water where they wanted it to go, and levees, they kept the water from coming where they didn't want it. So these were very big parts. And then I want you guys to, again, pause the video right now, and we'll go over the next section once you've read it. Alright, so next we have the problem of building and maintaining a complex irrigation system. So this was a problem. Silt is a problem, like we said before. It clogs irrigation systems, and that's why anytime like a buildup with silt would happen, it would really complicate things because if one canal got clogged, it would disrupt all the others after it. So say there's a canal right here, and then it branches off several times, and then those branch off several times. But say we got a clog right here, the water doesn't go down any of these canals. So that's a big problem. But the way the farmers solved this was they started moving closer together so that they could more easily maintain the canals and irrigations, like the irrigation system in general. So they moved together and they started working together as a collective, which is really going to bring us to the next part, which was getting attacked from neighboring communities. So I want you to pause again, and we're going to go over that in a second once you've read it. Alright, so keywords again. So as Sumerian cities grew, they began to fight over water, and that's a big problem. Because once they fight, starts wars. That's a problem. So the plains provided no natural barrier. So if one village decided, hey, I want to go attack that village, there's nothing stopping them really except for the villagers. So they didn't really have any way to keep enemies out. But their solution to this was they started building walls around their cities, and they dug moats to keep enemies out. So that was how they solved that problem. It's a pretty simple section, very important though. So I want you to pause again, and we're going to go to the next section. Alright, so just saying, this is kind of the wrap up of this section. So in what way did the Sumerians change their living styles? They went from living in these tiny little huts away from everybody else to living in these giant villages or giant city-states with huge walls around them, moats around the exterior, farming areas outside. So, and they also had their own forms of government. So we're gonna keep going over this a little bit later. That's really the end of this section. There are a couple pictures that we did have. This is what a typical irrigation system looks like, and this is what levees looked like. And again, back here to the city-state. So I'll see you next class.